Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to our podcast, Morning Latte with the Buechlers. I'm Cynthia Buechler.
And I'm Bill Buechler. Good morning to you. And today we are going to talk about some changes that we had through the Texas legislature. House Bill 114 dealing with marijuana and vaping and e-cigarettes.
Yeah, that bill is a very interesting bill, and of course, it has created a little bit of havoc for us within the schools. So can you please tell me what is the big thing that happened in House Bill 114?
Yeah, it's a little confusing at first because what the legislature did was actually reduce the penalties for possession, distribution, whatever, of THC. So it goes from an expellable offense to a mandatory DAEP offense. And then because of the crisis that we're seeing with respect to e-cigarettes and vaping in schools, they increased the penalty there and they made it a mandatory offense to go to the DAEP.
So what do you think the legislature was smoking when they made this particular decision?
We don't know. I would like to know and sit in on those committee meetings to see what happens. But it was a little confusing because I think when the legislation was first introduced with respect to the House bill, obviously coming out of the House, the focus was on the vaping. And then I'm not sure what happened at the Senate level, but then the marijuana THC component came into it. So that's why we ended up, it seems kind of contradictory for smoking tobacco, the penalties go up, marijuana goes down. But now it's kind of a level playing field. They're all mandatory DAEP offenses.
So what is the big push, or why has there been such an impetus on vaping?
Yeah, and y'all have seen it in the schools, I'm sure. The amount of vaping and that kids having e-cigarettes has just gone up considerably. I think I read a statistics where from 2020 to 2022, the amount of kids vaping went up like 47%, which is a very significant amount. I think around the country, like 2.5 million kids, and this is at the intermediate level or middle school level and high school level. The numbers have just gone off the charts. So about 1 in 4 has said they on a regular basis, which is a bit alarming because obviously there are health concerns there with development of kids, physical development, lungs, and that type of thing. And then I had seen that in one of the larger school districts in Texas, they had cases that were about 30 a month, where they had about 30 a month dealing with vaping and e-cigarettes, jumped to 300 a month. So that's a significant increase, caused them alarm, and that's what got the legislature back.
With that being said, then what kind of resources or anything are available to parents and educators and students for that matter to address which appears to be an epidemic of vaping?
Yeah, it is an epidemic. And of course, education for the students and parents who are new to this. I mean, when Cynthia and I, when I grew up, we didn't have vape pens or anything like that. So I still don't know what the cartridges look like and how it's loaded up. So there is an educational component. And obviously it's when the kids vape through this, it's not filtered as much. It's a very strong thing. And it doesn't have a scent. So that's part of it's like a kid smoking in the bathroom. In our day, you could see the smoke billowing out and you could smell it, but the vaping hides some of that. So that's a concern. So education is going to be a very critical component. One of them that's out there through the Texas School Safety Center, the Say What program is a very good program, and that's one that's recommended for educational purposes for the parents, students, and really the educators.
And I will say that when I first saw a vape pen, I thought it was a highlighter. I didn't know what it was. So yes, we all have had a learning curve with that. With that being said, though, when you talked about the jump that happened even with that one large school, making it mandatory seems like it's going to turn the DAEP into instead of a DAEP, it's going to be called the vape house. Yeah. So what do they do when all their DAEPs are full?
Yeah, and I think we both have faced questions on that because during the trainings, because that's the initial panic because it is such a common thing. It's not a proper thing, but it's a common thing. So if it's a mandatory DAEP placement, we're going to be overrun with that. So the legislature dealt with that a little bit, and essentially what they said is that if your DAEP is full, then if a kid who is mandatorily placed for vaping or having possessing an e-cigarette, we can place them in-school suspension. And then if the place opens up in the DAEP, then that kid can go into that place. If they're serving 15 days, for instance, and they've served the entire 15 days in ISS, then they don't go to the DAEP after that. They've served that out. So basically, that's what your option is in that circumstance. If your DAEP is full, we still have to address it under the code of conduct, but we can place it in ISS until a spot opens up.
Now with this bill, it didn't specify a length of time that the student goes over the DAP. What does that mean for schools?
Yeah, it doesn't. So it's like other types of offenses. Under our student code of conduct, we can determine what the appropriate length of time would be. So it doesn't say 30 days, 60 days, or 90 days. We can make that determination. And if a school district has some level of discretion in there, and we let our campus behavior coordinator or the principal have some discretion to deal with that, then we can decide on a local basis how long it's going to be. So it is similar to other offenses. It's a mandatory removal. However, we can decide how long it's going to be.
So with respect to the fact that it says it's a mandatory removal, what if I have a student who is receiving special services and we catch them with a vape and it's mandatory? Does that student just go over there?
Yeah, and I always listen to Cynthia on our in-service. She's very good. She teaches me what the rule is on this. Mandatory means maybe in the special education context, right? So what we have to do in that circumstance, like we would in other special education situations, we need to make sure we have an MDR, see if the behavior is related to the disability, and let the art committee go from there. So again, in the special ed context, state law, federal law trumps state law. So with our MDR situation, mandatory becomes maybe depending on the circumstances.
I'm just so thrilled
Such a good
that he
student.
actually listens and he called, and that I need a tissue. That's so beautiful.
I have such a good teacher.
Thank you, yes. Oh, remember that word, mandatory means maybe in special ed. If you learn anything else from this, that's a good one.
Yes.
Thank you, Bill. I think we feel great. Okay, so let's talk about then, what if I'm a school of innovation? How does that impact whether or not I am dealing with this vaping?
Yeah, and that's a great question. So some of you are in a district of innovation, some of you aren't. Let me just briefly explain what that means. Basically, a few years ago, the legislature said that we understand that each district is unique. We have so many districts around the state, over 1,000. Some have requirements, some have needs that other districts might not have. So a district of innovation allows us, the board, to decide that some components of the education code we're not going to follow because it doesn't fit with what our needs are in our local area. However, of course, the agency has said there are some provisions that you just can't avoid. So since we're dealing with this in the discipline context, let's look under Chapter 37. As it stands here today, there are only two provisions where the education agency has said through rulemaking that we cannot opt out of two provisions of Chapter 37. The first one being having your campus behavior coordinator, and the second one is the teacher removal component. So, you know, in certain circumstances, child's misbehavior will warrant a teacher having the ability to remove that child from the class. So right now, as it stands, those are the two provisions out of Chapter 37 that the education agency says districts cannot opt out of. Doesn't mention anything about this with vaping and e-cigarettes. So as it stands here today, I think it would be possible for the school district to opt out of these mandatory requirements with the e-cigarettes. So that's something, if you are a district of innovation, you know, you can go back and review those plans and change those plans. It has to be through board action. So that's something, if this is a concern for your district, then it's something to look at as far as the DOI is concerned.
So can an administrator just say, okay, I think I want to opt out?
Right, no. So the administrator can't do the opt-out, even though it might be a very innovative administrator. They can't opt out on their own. That has to be a board plan where they can do that. So again, going back to how long the child would stay in the DAEP, we can have it under our code of conduct where it's varying days. An administrator may have some discretion over that, but it is a mandatory remove on the e-cigarette, vaping, and the THC components right now.
Well, that's a lot of great information. I do want to make sure that you are aware that Bill is going to be speaking at our Fall Nelly Conference on discipline, which includes this marijuana and includes also the vaping, as well as all the other fun aspects that we deal with on a daily basis with schools that deals with discipline. So please, love to have you there at our conference, and that is going to be December 6th through the 8th. And you can register and get the agenda and the brochure and everything if you will go to nellylaw.net.
Yes, very good. And always remember when we're doing this, we always say this on the morning latte part of this. If you have a specific situation or if you're unsure, you need some clarification on this, make sure you speak to your own legal counsel on this. We do this for informational purposes. We're always available, but if you have any specific questions, make sure you run this by your legal counsel, because it can get tricky and we want to make sure everything's done right.
Unless you are, of course, one of our clients, and of course you can call us.
Exactly.
So have a wonderful, wonderful day and see you at the next
Yes, enjoy.
morning latte.